When you're creating content on someone else's behalf, at least in my opinion, you have to be a good steward of their brand. My advice would be don't create content as if you're the expert, because that's when you get into this mismatch of like actual experience versus portraying your experience. You read about a lot of these creatives and you kind of start to realize that maybe all creative work is grunt work. If you have a crazy idea, just like try it, see what happens. What's the worst thing that could happen? You could get invited onto a podcast and say it didn't work. And it's like, let me tell you, it's not that bad to say that. Like, nobody cares. So I think you have a few options, and it depends on what you want out of your life. So you just have to decide, what do you want to do with your life before you can answer this question. So it's very easy. I think the most interesting analogy for this is you are creating an API for yourself. You can go to the all-knowing Oracle and get all kinds of answers. Sometimes you just want to be told what to do so you can get back to work. And I think that is still valuable.
Hello, Internet. Welcome back to the Code and Content Podcast, the podcast for conversations at the intersection of code and content. I'm back in San Francisco visiting our office here and speaking to a few of our team members while I'm in town, recording a few podcast episodes, and you'll see those over the coming weeks. But for now, this episode I recorded with Aaron Francis was really great to do while I was here as well. So Aaron has been the main character of the internet for the last 12 months or so on web development Twitter. And he's seen both sides of the equation, both creating content inside of an internal team and also now independently. And I wanted to talk about the challenges and the opportunities that presents, because a lack of constraints can be actually difficult to create creative work. The grunt work behind creative work, and also what it means to be extremely human in the age of AI. And a really good point I thought was made about being your true self, but perhaps not your whole self online. So I found this conversation really interesting, and I can't recommend enough the Screencasting course. There's a bunch of us did that at Sanity, and it's just a very good way to learn how you should be doing that sort of content without having to think of any of that yourself or learn it yourself for the first time. So can't recommend that enough. Check that course out after you have finished listening to this episode. One final note too, we have a huge release of our own coming up very soon. You do need to sign up to register your interest for that. Make sure you come along and check out our event. It's at the beginning of May. I'll include a link in the show notes and you can go and check that out. Aaron, welcome to the Code and Content Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Simeon. You gave me this sweater, and I'll pretend like I wore it just for your show, but I wear it every single day. So thanks for the sweater.
That's excellent. So I'm hoping no other startups steal the sweater idea, and if we can just own the sweater space, we will just keep shipping sweaters.
Nobody can make them this comfy, so I think you're okay.
Wow, there you go. Maybe that's our pivot at some point. Like if this whole content thing
sweaters.
doesn't work out. I'll run it up the chain and see how it goes.
See how that goes. Make sure maybe you have a backup plan if you come with this big idea of pivoting into sweaters. They might pivot you out the door, so just be careful with that.
Yeah. They might not be the boil the oceans idea that we're looking for, but
No.
Luckily the content thing's going pretty well. So no need to pivot just yet. So
Good.
So I wanted to get you on the podcast because you create an awful lot of content, and you love this word content, and I love content creation as well. But I guess you're uniquely positioned because you were doing a great job creating content inside of a startup, inside of a company there for quite some time, and we don't need to reheat what happened there about a year ago. But now you've been creating content outside independently for about a year. Before I dive into specifics, do you have any sort of broad strokes first thoughts on the differences between the two, what you were doing a year ago and what you've been doing the last year?
Yeah, when you're creating content on someone else's behalf, at least in my opinion, you have to be a good steward of their brand. And so you can't just go out and say whatever you want. You can't create content about whatever you want. You kind of have to. I took that I think that is a duty because somebody has handed me the microphone and said, go speak on behalf of our company. And it's wow, that's a pretty big responsibility. And I took that pretty seriously. But then when you go out on your own, you're way more free to just kind of create content about whatever you want to create content about. Now, my brand is not to be real, spicy and controversial, but I could do that if I wanted to. And there's just a lot more freedom when you're out on your own.
Yeah. I know I felt the same when I started editing the first few episodes of this, and I interviewed one of our co-founders, and I'm sort of looking at the camera shot after the fact, and I'm like, this is actually quite an amazing responsibility that one of our co-founders gave me to like represent the company and be the
Yes.
company mascot, I tell myself quite regularly. So yeah, it is a huge
Yes.
responsibility. Yeah, definitely. That freedom though that you've got now, is that like a mixed blessing and a curse? Because like
Hmm.
with no constraints, you can create literally anything now. And
Yeah.
constraints, I think it can be a really good thing for creative work.
Yeah, it is. Like when I was back at the old company, it was just make videos about MySQL, the database. And it was like, oh,
Yeah.
all right, well, I can do that. And now now it's a lot of, well, make a video about anything. And with that freedom does come a lot of, analysis paralysis of like, well, what should I make a video about?
Yeah.
I've drawn a few lines where it's like people will say like, "Hey, what do you think of? Can you compare Astro to Svelte?" And I'm like, "No, never used either of them. I can't." And
Yeah.
that's one thing that I've been pretty hard on is like I'm not gonna opine on things that I don't have experience on. And if I do, it'll be like, "Hey, I'm observing from the outside. This we'll say React community. I'm observing React from the outside. Here's what I'm observing about server components, for example." But I'll never say like server components are bad or good because it's like friends, I have not used those, and so that does create that creates a little bit of a constraint. Is I only talk about things that I either know or have used or am learning. That's totally fine, or like am doing in my actual work. But still, it's a pretty blank canvas. And I have that has sometimes held me back of like, oh man, I should create a video about this, and it's like, do you want to though? And the answer usually comes back no. And so I'm trying to like get better at being more like, what are you interested in right now? Make a video on that, and don't worry about like what the cultural zeitgeist is at the
Yeah, that seems like a cheap growth strategy is to just like
moment.
involve yourself in every conversation, right? Where it does seem much more interesting because like I kind of want to know what Aaron Francis thinks of those things, but like I know that you probably don't care about them, so you wouldn't have fully bought into the difference
Yeah,
between those
whether
two
I
things are anyway.
Yeah, whether I care about it or not is still an open question because I've just never even tried it. And so it's like I
Yeah,
have kind of a null response about it. It's like I know that they exist, but I view myself as an educator like at my core. And so for me to take like a surface level pass at two different things and then compare them feels really really gross to me. And so that's
yeah.
just where, something that I don't do.
It's that scratching your own itch is a good guiding principle, right? Like, so if you are
Yes,
actively using
totally.
those things and interested in it, how do you find that balance though? Because I know like the difference between, to use internet parlance, yapping and shipping, because
Mm,
you do have a good informed opinion on something, you need to have, I think, have built something reasonably good on it. But
yeah.
often in the education space, I know I find this sometimes I'm asked my opinions on some of those things, but I only have the time to sort of run through their quick start tutorial and then say, yeah, I kind of like it in this 5 minute demo I had. Like,
Right.
so yeah, like trying to find the time to really test something out so that then you can give an opinion on it can be tough. Like, how much emphasis do you put on building something thoroughly to then understand it to be able to educate it?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, I think step one for creating content is be a developer for 20 years. I mean, that's not necessarily true, and that's like a false barrier, but that is part of that is true that like um well, let me separate like there's good content that can be made as you're learning something, and I think that is very
Yes.
very very valuable. And so if you are just beginning, my advice would be don't create content as if you're the expert, because that's when you get into this
Yeah.
mismatch of like actual experience versus portraying your experience. And one, I think that's wrong, but two, I think you're going to get found out, and that's not
Yeah.
great, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So like if you're just learning, you don't have to wait 20 years to create content. That I personally did. But if you're just learning, create content about the things that you're learning and couch them as like or like say that they are things that you're learning. That's fantastic. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
amazing. People can learn like people just one or two steps behind you can learn better probably from you because you're not the expert who has forgotten all these weird little incantations that you have to do to make things work, right?
You don't have
So
that built-in curse of knowledge and the context
yes,
that you haven't
exactly.
actually written out
Yeah.
in full.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's one side. It's like, how do you create content without having years of experience? You talk about what you're learning. That's fantastic. Who could hate that? The other
Yeah.
side is, if you are an expert or want to create content as an expert, I do think you just got to spend a ton of time in the trenches actually doing the thing. And so for me, I am benefited greatly by the fact that I have basically used the same stack for 20 years. It's had different little flavors, like, but when I started, I started with ASP.NET, and then like 6 months after that, I switched to PHP. This is like when I'm 13, and I've been using PHP ever since. So I've been using PHP and predominantly MySQL for 20 years. I have done Postgres and SQLite. I have done different JavaScript front ends. I've kind of settled on Vue.js. And so now any content that I want to create in that like sort of loose realm, I feel pretty confident in. And a lot of the stuff that I'm creating now is like, it's not hey, here's the new way to do whatever in React 19, because again,
Yeah.
that's not something I know. It's more like, hey, I was writing code for my mini projects, and here's something I came across, or a technique or a pattern or something I didn't know, or something that I think other people don't know, and here is that technique or pattern or whatever. And so I'm trying to extract most of the content from my day-to-day work versus sitting down with a blank sheet of paper and saying create content, which is just like, it's really stressful.
Yeah, which like that's the land grab on YouTube, is like to have the first video on the new React features
Yes.
or something, and that sounds like a race to the bottom, just for that
and
speed.
and a
And
race to exhaustion. Can you imagine?
oh yeah, yeah, you'd be on a content hamster
Oh,
wheel at that point.
like something
It
comes out and you're like, sorry babe, I got to run to my computer and record a breaking
yeah,
news
yeah,
video. I'm like, I
hot new
can't live that
API.
way. Oh, I'm so
No,
sorry.
it's a young man's game. That one, I'm aged out of that. But
young
yeah,
young man, zero kids game for sure.
yes, yes, I'm too old and too experienced to be chasing down new
Yes.
APIs.
Goodness.
Sticking with one tech stack for 20 years also unheard of, but
Wild,
very
right? Yeah.
very smart. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
So like then sort of spinning back to days where you were churning out MySQL videos, like
Yeah.
how do you then like find the inspiration or the enthusiasm? Because I know like enthusiasm is like 90% of the job, right? Like and
Yes.
so to then be very enthusiastic about the thing that is essentially paying your bills, like that's, I mean,
Correct.
I genuinely think Sanity is an awesome product. So like that
Hmm.
enthusiasm is for real. But at the, I guess like if you are creating content on a schedule or because of a new
Hmm.
release, then you never want to appear fake. So did you ever had to sort of suck yourself up, or I suppose like databases were what excited you anyway? So that enthusiasm was always
Yeah,
natural.
so that's always natural. I mean, I like databases. I just really, really like them. The way that I ended up working at that company was I was independently, for no money, no client or anything. I was independently writing about databases because I thought they were interesting. So I had that going for me already. Um, in terms of like being excited, I think there's maybe two angles to that. Excuse me. One is being excited to sit down and record, and the other is like being excited on camera so that that excitement comes through to the people. And being excited on camera, I have an advantage because I'm an American and we're excitable, right? We're loud, we do too much all the time. And so truly, like, I teach a course on how to make videos, and one of the things that I say is like, you need to be yourself. Don't try to be somebody else, but you need to take yourself and turn it up 10, 15, 20% on camera, because on camera that comes through as like normal. And so you're going to feel crazy being like in your basement or whatever, and like talking loud and kind of being a little bit funny or whatever it is to you, but amped up 10, 15, 20%. You're going to feel crazy. And then you're going to watch the video back and you're going to think, I'm kind of low energy, or like, oh, that's how I normally am. And you're like, wait a second, what happened between me and the camera that the energy went down? And so that's one thing. But in terms of like being excited to sit down and record, that part's really hard. I mean, there are like, I think, creative techniques you can apply, which is basically like, you'll hear who's the guy, Brandon Sanderson, talk about he just sits down and he spends, for him it's like 4 hours a day, and all he's allowed to do during that time is write, and then he doesn't have to do anything else the rest of the day that he doesn't want to do. I think who's the guy that wrote Star Wars, George Lucas. He had the same deal. He would sit down from 9 to 5, which is brutal, and his only job was to write 5 pages. And sometimes he would knock off around 1 or noon because he got it done. And sometimes he would go downstairs at 5 p.m. with 0 pages written. And it's like, God, that is brutal. But that's kind of the game. And so back when I was doing it, as a W-2, a lot of the times I would just sit down and just like either with the MySQL documentation or one of these mini MySQL books back here, or like go to, what is it, Algolia's Hacker News search, and just search for old MySQL articles. And I would just look for stuff. And if anything just like sparked my fancy, you just grab onto that as fast as you can. And you're like, okay, there's something like I can do that. That's really interesting to me. Let me turn on the camera. So yeah, it's a lot harder when like you have to do it to get, to keep your job. But there are ways that you can kind of like inspire yourself.
That's interesting because it really is a creative work, what we're doing. Like, because we couldn't do the recording part without like some creativity and enthusiasm behind it. But it is also grunt work a lot of the time, like you say, of like just sitting down and writing the thing out and just making the thing happen. So having to balance the grunt work and the creative work, it makes it interesting.
Yeah, and you read about a lot of these creatives, and you kind of start to realize that maybe all creative work is grunt work. Like the flash of inspiration comes when you're just like lashing yourself to the mast so that you can be there when the inspiration comes, so
Yeah.
I always think that like the great creatives, and maybe someone like Taylor Swift is this way, but I always think the great creatives are just like breezing through from wonderful idea to wonderful idea. And then you read about George Lucas, and he's like, I sat there for 9 hours and I could not write a single word and I hated my life. And you're like, oh, cool. That's awesome. Same. And that makes me feel a lot better.
Actually, that's funny. I think about it when I see your content. I've thought about it for years with others like Wes Boss, when you see their content online, like they just look like chill guys, like hanging out, like a cool hang. Like this is the sort of the personality that comes across through the camera. But I know behind the scenes, like literally you called your company Try Hard Studios. Like there's a lot of hard work that goes in behind the scenes to make it look that chill or that relaxed.
Yep, exactly.
Just through preparation. So, and I think sort of touching back on something you're talking about before, like I know I'll typically write a blog post or something just because like I learned this thing and I'm excited about it in this moment right now. And it's I needed to know what this documentation example didn't cover. So here's the thing I found out while trying to fix that missing piece. And less premeditated. I need to create this piece of content, and more, I learned this thing in this moment and I'm excited about it and I want to share it. Which that's a theme for a few episodes here as well. Is I think this job also requires a certain amount of oversharing. Would you describe yourself as an oversharer?
I would describe myself as a trained oversharer. Yes. I think by nature I am very introverted and like to be alone, be with a very small group of friends. But by nature that I am different. Like I'm that way just naturally. But I've trained myself to become very good at noticing things that like anything where I'm working or reading or doing something, and in the back of my head I go, that's interesting. Like that, I have trained myself for that is the cue that drives the behavior of sharing something. So at that point, like my job is done. I said, that's interesting. I wrote it down, or I made a video, I put it out, and my responsibility to that idea or that content is fulfilled. Whether it's like a slam dunk or a bust, that's not really my problem. Because now I have done the work and I can, get back to doing what I was doing.
Yeah. I think something that's been interesting to see you do lately as well is kill some ideas, which that can't be easy either.
No,
when you think it's a great idea, and you're so close to the middle of that, this thing's going to be a slam dunk success. I know you talked about on other podcasts, like on your podcast as well, that fusion in particular. But I suppose is that that's part of the freedom that you now have, that you can build whatever you like. But then if it doesn't work out, it takes a lot of courage to walk away, though. Like, I don't know if there's anything
it's
more
real
you want to share
embarrassing.
on
Yeah,
that.
for sure. So no, I had a library.
You shouldn't be embarrassed for trying.
I shouldn't, but yet I am, which is interesting.
Yeah. I would be the
I
same.
had a library called Fusion and spent like 3, 4, 5 months just kind of working pretty hard on it, and then gave a big talk at Laracon EU in Amsterdam about the library. And I thought, this is people are either going to love this or they're going to hate it. But I think it's technically extremely interesting. And that part was true. It is technically extremely interesting. And I had a lot of fun doing it, and a lot of pain, because it was like, boy, this is really hard. And I released it, and nobody cared. I mean, a lot of people hated it, which, that's Reddit, so that doesn't bother me and doesn't go into the calculus. But beyond that, nobody liked it. Nobody was like, oh, please, like, where's the next release? Like, hey, man, are you still, like, what's going on here? Didn't hear a word about it. And so, yeah, after maybe like 2 months of it being released and me kind of dabbling with it, and not a single soul saying like, hey, man, are you, like, what's going on here? I'm using it. I'm having it. And it's like, all right, nobody cares. Nobody cares. And the road before me on that project was quite long. It was like, you're going to spend a few years working on this and evangelizing it and trying to convince people to use it. Is that what you want to do when the start has been so lukewarm? And, once you take the ego out of it, the answer was easy. No, I don't want to do that at all. But the ego made me hold on, because I was like, oh, dude, you just gave this big conference talk, and then you went on a podcast, and then you made a little video, and like, you're just going to say, oh, man, didn't work. And that's exactly what I did. I said, oh, man, didn't work, and it's over. And I feel great about it. But the whole like, hey, sorry that guy made a big deal about this and it didn't work, that part is embarrassing. But turns out nobody cares at all except me. But still, it's like, oh, it doesn't feel awesome.
So nobody cares you released it, and nobody cares that you gave it up? Like, it feels like a win-win, right?
People care about themselves, and which is a lesson I continually learn. I'm always like, what are people going to think about me? And everybody else is thinking, what are people going to think about me? And nobody's thinking about anyone else. So
so true. No one think about you. Yeah, I think is it the spotlight theory? Is that what it like? People believe the spotlight's on them, but I think last time I googled this, because I thought this phenomenon must have a name, and I think it's the spotlight theory, that everyone believes the spotlight's on them. Yeah, or I might have just made that up. But no, that's cool, because then it frees you up to chase the next thing, right? That might be the smash hit success. And we talk here about like win or learn. Like, there's no real failures. Like, you must have learned things in the process of that. Yeah. And
I learned a ton, and it wasn't all for naught. I mean, I had stuff to talk about all the way through, and it was all very interesting. And then, I learned a lot in like actually, packaging the whole thing up and making it one cohesive experience. And then turns out that like the actual thing I was going for didn't work, but the whole journey was still valuable. And so I would say, like, if you have a crazy idea, just like try it, see what happens. What's the worst thing that could happen? You could get invited onto a podcast and say it didn't work. And it's like, let me tell you, it's not that bad to say that. Like, nobody cares. So yeah, it was totally worth it. And also it was a complete failure. So not so bad.
That might be the bigger story. Maybe you'll have inspired other people to walk away from projects they no longer are interested in, and that could be great. A community
you see
win.
Too many, yes, you see too many, predominantly indie hackers pursuing these ideas for years without it, like, getting any traction. And I looked at that and I was like, I don't want to do that. Like, I've done that before, actually, and I don't want to do it again. So yeah, hey y'all, if you want to quit something, just quit it. Hit the bricks. Get out of here. It's great.
I think, I see about like Try Hard Studios, but like you don't want to get labeled as Just Quit Studios or something like that.
Just Quit Studios.
No, that's cool. So what do we think about distribution is something else I'd like to talk to you about as well. Like, I know you're very active on X, the Everything app. formerly known as Twitter. I think that's the full name
Formerly,
of the
yes.
platform now. How much do you think about like tailoring your content for those audiences as well? Because I know like you post videos on YouTube, and YouTube's something that I'm becoming increasingly obsessed with, but like
Mm-hmm.
creating content for YouTube is a whole thing in itself.
Yeah.
So like how much do you think about the content I'm creating, then it needs to be formatted in a particular way or speak it in a particular way, framed in a particular way for where I'm posting that as well?
Yeah, I think um so I think you have a few options, and it depends on what you want out of your life. So you just have to decide, what do you want to do with your life before you can answer this question. So it's very easy. So here's what I mean. I think if you want to win, then I think you need to play by the rules of the platform, whether implicit or explicit. So that's if you want to win. If you want to do whatever you want to do, you should just do whatever you want to do. And so it comes down, I think sometimes people will be like, I'm not going to change who I am for the platform. And I'm like, that's great. Do whatever you want to do. Don't expect to put out long form, thoughtful content on TikTok and have it do well. Like,
Yeah.
but if you don't want to change what you're doing, that's fine. But then you can't then be mad that your content is not succeeding. We see this a lot on X.com, the everything app, where people are like, my engagement or my reach has tanked, and you look at all their content and it's just kind of like RSS auto posting, and you're like, yeah, like what do you
It
expect?
deserves
It's
to. Yeah.
terrible. Yeah, it's terrible content. And then they say, well, it used to be, and I'm like, okay, like what do you want out of life? Do you want to win? Well, you got to play the game. Do you want to do what you want to do? Well, you can't be mad if you lose. Like,
Yeah.
those are the rules. And so for me, I want to win. But I also don't post on TikTok because I don't want to play by those rules. I don't want to do what they're doing over there. I don't think there's anything morally wrong with most content on TikTok. I just don't want to do short form, high energy, high cuts. Like, I just don't want to do that. I don't have the energy for it. I don't think I have the taste for it. And
Hmm.
so I don't do
That's
it.
the big one. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like I feel very comfortable on X. I feel like I get that platform. I can be myself and play by the rules, the implicit rules of that platform without betraying who I am. And so I spend a lot of time over there. I feel the same way about YouTube, because YouTube is even more kind of like fast and loose. Because it's like, yeah, there's an audience for everything on YouTube, even more so than X. And so on YouTube, it's like, what do I want to do? And here's an interesting nuance about like the rules of the platform. Um, it might have changed in the past like 6 months or so, but for the longest time, the implicit rule of YouTube was you have to have a clickbait thumbnail. Like, they would
Uh,
never say that, but that was the rule. Like, you have to have clickbait. Like, you have to be really shocked you have to put a shocked face on your
Must be a red
thumbnail,
arrow pointing at something.
red arrow, and the title's like, I can't believe React just did this. And like,
Hmm.
that was the rule. And I decided, like, I don't like that. That is abhorrent to me, and I'm not gonna do that. And so where I draw the line on YouTube is like, I am going to try to make a very clickable thumbnail, because that is the rule. But I'm not going to go all the way to shocked face, I can't believe that this mundane thing is happening. Like, I'm just not going to do that. And so I tailored the message to the medium a little bit, but I'm still gonna have rules that I don't break. And so that's how I think about the different platforms. Like X, I just feel totally natural, totally fine. YouTube, I feel pretty comfortable. I don't follow all of the implicit rules. TikTok, I observe it and I'm like, that is not for me. Like, maybe that is how, like, maybe some people feel incredibly comfortable there. And I would imagine that they're much younger than I am. And that's
Hmm.
awesome. And I realize I am aging out of like the popular social medias. And that's totally fine.
Yeah.
I'm not going to play that game.
Yeah, much the same. Like I know there are audiences on TikTok and Instagram, but I don't have the taste for it, I think is the word you
Mm-hmm.
used. And I think that's how I see myself as well. As I know I can make a good YouTube video and
Yep.
a reasonably good tweet every now and then. But
Mm-hmm.
yes, that's the difficult part, is having the taste. And it's better just to not try and then put your resource into everything else. And
Yeah.
I think, to the more I've studied like the YouTube strategies at the moment, like a title and thumbnail still everything, but I've been seeing that through the lens of that a lot of what makes great YouTube content, I think, is just good marketing strategy in general. So yeah, a current thought I'm working with is that the things that make YouTube videos successful would actually make an entire marketing campaign successful anyway.
Yes.
And so you could filter those things back to the other platforms.
Yes, and I think there's a failure mode of people that go on YouTube and they're like, I'm not gonna play the YouTube meta game. Like, I'm not gonna do silly thumbnails. And I'm like, that's fine. But people still have to want to click on your thumbnails.
Yeah.
Right? So you don't have to go all the way into crazy face. But if you put out a video and it's got like a webinar name and webinar thumbnail, nobody's going to click on it, and that might make you sad. If that doesn't make you sad, by all means continue on. But if you're going to go on YouTube and have this moral stance of YouTube is awful and I'm not going to play the game, you should expect results consistent with that. And I think that's where a lot of people get their mismatches. They're like, I'm not going to play the game, and I'm going to be mad that I'm losing the game. And you're like, no, you're going to be frustrated your whole life. You have to like reason and make these two things coherent.
Yeah. Distribution's important as well. And so like I think like there's an entire audience on YouTube that would never be on X.
Correct.
Where I feel like, particularly in web development and those who are on X and enjoy it, like it's a bit of an echo chamber, right?
Correct.
Or like it feels like everyone's there, but I bet there's a million developers on YouTube that aren't on Twitter at all.
Yeah.
So
easily.
Reaching out to those audiences is super important as well, because not everybody is on Twitter like it feels like everybody is on Twitter.
Yes, 100%.
Do you have any thoughts too on, you were speaking about like, I just want to be myself on those platforms. People might say that, but you end up becoming a version of yourself, I feel like is the best strategy, right? Like I don't post every waking thought that I have on Twitter, though I would like to, but you still need to be true to yourself. So it's a difficult balance, isn't it? Because you can't be entirely yourself, because perhaps that would be detrimental to building an audience. But yeah, you do need to be true to yourself as well, so that authenticity coming back to is still bought into.
Yep. The way that I think about this is, and I think I've thought about this a lot. I think just first, like anecdotally, I think if somebody meets you in person or says about you in person, oh, they're this way online, but in person, they're just this way and they're so whatever. Like that to me is indicative of frankly, a moral failing. Like if you go online and you pretend to be someone else under your own name and face, I'm not talking about playing a character behind a character name. That's like art or whatever. But if you go online as Simeon Griggs and you are playing a character and then in person, you're like, hey, that was all pretend. Like I'm just doing that so I can get clicks. It's like, I think that is an awful thing to do personally. And so the way that I think about it is, everything that I say online is 100% true and authentic and something that I like will put my whole chest behind and totally believe. 100% of what I say online is that way, but that is a fraction of 100% of who Aaron Francis is, right? So I have like this much bigger, deeper well of personality, and a portion of that is expressed online. And
like a vertical slice is what you're putting out there.
Yes, exactly. And so I don't talk about politics online. In fact, I don't talk or think about politics very much at all, but I definitely don't do it online. I very rarely, if ever, talk about my children online. My children are a much bigger part of my life than Laravel, but I just I don't want to speak on their behalf when they're so young and put them out into places that they had no control over, right? Yeah. And so I'll share pictures of them and their faces are always covered. And that's just a decision that we have made as a family, because it's like, they're 3 and 1. They didn't have a say in this. Yeah. And I very rarely will talk about religion online. And when I do, it's always as it relates to me as an individual. And so those are some decisions that I have made. And all of those things are very available to like offline friends. So like if we're at a conference or I'm like with my local friends, all of those things are on the table. But I just don't bring all of those things to the internet because, one, it's like, who's out there? Like, who's out there listening? Who's out there watching? I don't know. I don't know. And then some things are just not it's just hard for them to go well on the internet. And a lot of like those things that I just described require like long, deep, nuanced conversations where like even I am trying to work out my stances and my beliefs. And
Yeah.
the internet, at least, you know, at least Twitter is not a great place to work out your own beliefs publicly with nuance. Like that's
No.
just going to go poorly for you. And so that's kind of my stance is like everything that you say online should be 100% true and authentic, but you don't have to say everything that you believe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good mix. And again, sort of that tricky balance thing is no one would follow you if you only ever talked about databases, but
Correct.
but everybody would walk away if you talked about everything, but or they wouldn't know you as the database guy if you talked about
Correct.
everything other than databases. So like,
Yes.
picking one of those one or two things in your life that people are interested in, like I like running, so I post about that occasionally, but then I'll also talk about content management because,
Yes.
yeah, you want to mix that up to some degree, but it's absolutely not
Yeah.
everything.
And in some ways, this is, I think the most interesting analogy for this is you are creating an API for yourself, right? So
Huh.
you are creating a known way for other people to interact with you, right? So when you become somewhat of a meme, and I say meme in terms of like, it's like a condensing of complexity, right? So a meme can communicate this like really nuanced thing in a funny image, right? But when you meme yourself, you're condensing your like full personality complexity into something a little bit smaller, and you're giving people affordances, you're giving them like handles onto which they can grasp. And so people know that they can approach me about databases, about videos, about having twins, about, you know, trying hard, about like putting yourself out there, because those are things that I continually talk about, and that gives people a way to interact with me through like a known protocol. So when they think of databases, they think, oh, I could go like talk to Aaron about that because he has exposed that port publicly. And like, I know that he talks about that. Let's talk about that together.
Yeah.
And so I think creating like your personal API, your social API for like the world to interact with is a good way to think about it.
Yeah, I think I just got the podcast episode title from that.
Exposing
I
your
know.
ports.
Yeah, maybe that one. Now
let's
I've got
not
two
go. Let's
titles to
not.
this.
Yeah, let's not go with that one. That one needs the context.
Yeah, so many lines I don't want to follow on that one. I'm, I'm so distracted. I suppose last one. I'll start wrapping up because I'm thankful for your time here. But like and actually, just one more comment on what you've said there, because I think it's interesting, is that you can't give yourself a nickname, right?
No.
But you've put those things out there, and some of those things have caught on more than others, and people now know you as those things. But it would be impossible, I think, to like start a new account today on X, the Everything app, and try and become that guy. Like people need to see you for that, and then you can build that audience around it once it catches on. So you put yourself out there and see what happens. The last thing I've got, I suppose, is developing taste, which we've sort of touched on a few times. Do you think it's possible to develop taste, or is that innate? Or again, is like everything, is the answer a little bit in between? Because like being able to write a hit tweet or like create a really great video, I think it requires a certain amount of taste. Do you think much about developing taste, or is it still just basically scratching your own itch? Or like, do you look at what's working? Because again, that's a very popular YouTube strategy, as well as find a format that's working in a different industry and then just like make your industry's version of that. So how much time do you think about researching taste? You talked about like doing some Algolia research there before, or do you think like I'm just putting everything through the Aaron Francis lens?
It is the latter. I'm putting everything through the Aaron Francis lens, but that is not something that is like divinely inspired, right? I think just naturally, I think you can be born or come into a certain amount of like good taste just naturally. I do believe that that is true. But if we take taste and we like switch it over to athletic talent, right? You can be born with a certain amount of like God-given natural athletic ability, but you can still get outworked by an average person and get totally freaking destroyed. And I think that's the same thing when it comes to taste. Is you can be born with a good eye, or like you can have grown up in a situation that gives you good taste, right? And that's lucky for you, and you should lean into that. But if you feel like, man, I don't have good taste at all, that's fine. You can 100% learn it. And I think the first step to having good taste is paying attention. Because I
Uh,
think if you pay attention, you start to see things like, boy, that spacing is all wonky, isn't it? Like, oh, why do I feel like that spacing is wonky? Oh, because wait a second, I should in my next, UI or whatever, I should remember that. And you add up enough of those things over time, and then suddenly you have good taste, right? And so I think the first step is one, this is probably not advice that anyone needs, consume a lot. You just need to consume a lot, right?
yeah.
But as you're consuming, you need to consume with a critical eye, which is not to say criticize it, but like observe it and break it down and say, boy, I really like that video. Oh, hey, whoa, let's back up.
Why?
Why
Yeah.
did I like that video?
Yeah.
What was it about that? And what are the so like, oh, I really liked when Simeon did that. Okay, what is the principle like? Why did I like that? And is there an underlying principle that I can pull out and say, because it was a callback joke, or because it showed like self-deprecation? And then you can start to think like, all right, I've got my little stable of principles here that I have observed from other creators, and
Uh,
now I'm starting to form what is the Aaron Francis lens, right? And then I run all the ideas through that, and that's just merely a conglomeration of a massive amount of consumption and critical eye and consolidation into what I think is good. And that is what is really important, is you have to develop enough internal rules so that you can look at something and say, I think that is good and I think that is bad. And until you get to that point, it's like, well, just keep consuming and keep writing notes and watching a random YouTube video about how to dig a basement under your own house, which I do. I'll watch these YouTube videos and be like, oh, that was a great little, I see what he did there. That was a great little technique. Let's put
uh,
that back in I'll watch a Seinfeld episode and think, that was genius. Like, that goes back into the bank. And so enough of those things put together is taste. And I think it's 100% learnable. You have to pay attention. You have to be diligent about it.
yeah. And I think it can be surprising after the fact when you learn those techniques, like how deliberate good
Yes.
good quality content is.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned it to Jason Langstoff because like you were there at the Web Dev
Yep.
Challenge we recorded last year, like how much work goes in behind the scenes to produce that quality
Mm-hmm.
of content. It's like it's no accident that that content looks so good in the end because a lot of deliberate practice went into it.
Yes.
And this dovetails nicely into, I wanted to talk lastly about the screencasting
Yeah.
course, which I'm a graduate of and can
Yes.
highly recommend. I think I've sold at least one copy of that course to
That's
somebody else.
amazing.
Thank you. But that too had a lot of like deliberate practice on like this is what you
Yes.
should be doing for lighting and framing videos and that sort of thing. And I think it's really cool too. I've seen other people post screencasts and I'm like, that person has taken the screencasting course
Mm-hmm.
because they've like their window arrangement looks
Yep.
the same as you learn in that. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that course and I think it's very cool to teach all the techniques required to make good screencasts. I suppose the question, maybe you're sick of answering this question, but
No.
like now we're in the age of AI and do we need people telling us how things work anyway? Like just today, there was a camera setting on here because I'm in America. There's lights
Mm.
flickering. I asked ChatGPT, what do I do? And it walked me through how to change
Yep.
the camera settings. I still believe that there's great value in having a person sit across the camera and teach you how to
Yep.
do things. I'm guessing you're still a strong believer in that as well. Do you have thoughts
Yeah.
on that going forward?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, I think your example is a good one where, like, at this point, you're not going to look up a YouTube video about that setting. And,
And I'm
like,
not going to buy a course.
you're not going to buy a course. No. And that is okay. I think that's fine. I think we can survive that.
Yep.
I think an interesting externality of this AI movement is the computers are getting better and better and better. And I think at the same time, people want more and more human connection. And so we're kind of in this space where it's like you can ask the computer literally to do anything. And I am a big AI user. When I'm coding, I'm like asking AI all sorts of things. And so I'm not anti and I'm not a Luddite at all.
Yeah.
But I am, an educator that makes videos. So I am thinking about like, what is my role in this new world? And I think there are, we'll say at least two roles for the human to play. One is the human connection, right? So you took screencasting.com. A big portion of that is me transferring the belief to you that you can do this thing, right?
Uh,
So a big part
uh,
of that course is like, listen, it's hard. Like, you're gonna record an entire video without a microphone and it sucks. And I've been there. And trust me, the next video is gonna be better. Like that second take you do after you get up and you go like walk outside and scream and then come back inside, that second take is going to be better. You can do it. I've been there. And so that's a big part of like something that the AI can't do. It can mimic that, but it doesn't hit because you know that they've never been there, right? It's a
uh,
disembodied machine. And so I think, being a human, being a human and connecting with other humans is still uniquely human. And that's why I'm so bullish on video remaining a big thing. Written word, I don't, if I was purely a writer, I would feel a lot more scared. But
uh,
because I am primarily a video creator, I feel okay about that. I think the second thing, um, a second role that humans can play is the curation and the comprehensive curriculum that a human can like put together from their experience. So one common failure mode I see in people using AI, let's say to code, is they'll go and they'll ask a discrete question and the AI will give a discrete answer. But what you don't know is that there is a better way, or like there's a different fundamental paradigm that you could have approached it with. But because you didn't ask, because you said, hey, how do I do this with this? It said, here's how
yeah.
you do that with that. And in
Yeah.
reality, it would have been better had you read the full documentation and known that thing X existed. And then you could have said to the AI, wait, doesn't thing X exist? Why didn't you use that? And it's going to say, aha, absolutely correct. That is a
Yeah.
better solution. And so I think for human educators, it still remains valuable to populate the student's mind with the roadmap of what exists. Because then once you have the entire landscape of what exists, even if it's very foggy and vague, you can then go to the AI and say, hey, listen, I remember learning that there is a way to do this and it was something shaped like this. Can you give me the details? And the AI is like, yeah, I got you,
Uh,
man. But if you don't know what you don't know, it's really hard to be a really effective user of AI. And I think that's a place where human intuition, human experience, human curation, cultivation still plays a big, big role. And that is something that, like, going back to your camera, maybe that is something you would buy a course on or like watch a few videos on, for example. Like, hey, I just got a Canon R6 and I want to set it up as a webcam. Here are the 8, 15, 20 settings and pieces of equipment and cables you need to set it up perfectly as a webcam. And then you can go to chat and say, like, hey, this setting is different in America. And it says, yeah. Back in the UK, it's called this. And in America, it's called that. And you're like, oh, cool. Thanks. Awesome. Let's keep going. But I do think there's something still available for human educators in the here is the way that you should do it. And here is the landscape of what exists.
Yeah. It makes me think of, and perhaps the truism through everything we've discussed today, it's about building trust, right?
Oh,
Because,
yeah.
and that's what AI will do. It will act in a way that a human wouldn't, in that it would break your trust by either hallucinating or yeah, like leaving out important details, like,
Mm-hmm.
because if somebody asked you how to set up something with a database and that was the wrong thing, like they just had the whole wrong idea, you wouldn't say, oh,
Yes, totally.
you can keep doing that. You'd say, no, step back and let's think larger about that. So yeah, that trust
Mm-hmm.
building thing probably is true throughout all human education. Is that
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I want you to trust me that I've got all of your best interests in mind.
Mm-hmm. And like with screencasting.com, for example, a I'm imparting my taste to you. And I say that in the course. This is
Yeah,
my taste. Feel free to steal it. This is my style. Here's how I set up my windows. Here's where I put my camera. This is my style. You can steal it until and unless you make up your own. And I think that is like that's still pretty valuable. Is here like you can go to the all-knowing oracle and get all kinds of answers. Sometimes you just want to be told what to do so you can get back to work. And I think that is still valuable.
Yeah, like having an expert tell you, like I've spent time in the trenches, and this is how I would do it. I know that that's incredibly useful. We find that with Sanity because it can do anything, but there's a lot of people that just want to know, but how would you do it? Because you do it all the time. And I remember saying the same to Adam Wathan at React Conf last year. It's like, it would be cool to see some lessons like he's just published recently. Like, how does Adam use Tailwind? Like, he's built the thing. There's probably no one else, more experienced using that. So, like, knowing from the person that spent the time building the thing how they would use the thing is incredibly valuable.
Yep. I know that there are 10 different ways to do the thing. I don't care about that. Adam, how do you do it? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, and I don't think I've changed any of the settings that I learned in the screencasting course. Like, I use all the same Apple scripts that came out. Like, because I don't like, I'm not someone who hacks my system for like efficiency and has all the shortcuts. It's like, just please tell me the way to do it, and then I'm going to get on with my life. And because I'd rather build the content than and create the content rather than spend time trying to make the process 1% more efficient here and there.
Yep.
So. No, very good. Cool. Well, thanks for your time on the podcast today. Is there anything we didn't cover, or any other tangents perhaps you wanted to go off on, or we can wrap it up tightly there?
No, let's wrap it up. I think the last thing is there's a new screencasting.com release coming in the next few weeks, and maybe it's out by the time you're hearing this. So check out screencasting.com for all new content. And Simeon, if you've already purchased it, you own the new content, so you're fine. Wow. So check out screencasting.com.
I'm very excited about the DaVinci Resolve one too.
Yeah,
so that's the one thing I want to change. Is I feel like I need to grow up past screen flow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just a shame because I'm very comfortable there, but it's time to sort of push outside the boundaries once again. So, thanks for coming out.
Yep. Thanks for having me.